Yep.
Daniella Bove LaMonica, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. It's so nice to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. Daniela is one of the co-authors of the new book, Flip This Risk for Enterprise Security, which is now available on Amazon. So Daniela, let me ask you a question. So when you heard that the book you contributed to reached #1 on the Amazon hot new release list, and then it listed as number 71 on the Amazon top 100 list in corporate governance. I mean, what was your reaction to that?
Well, of course it did, was my reaction. There's such a gap in the literature. There's such a need for corporate security practitioners to codify what we do. I think everyone's so busy doing that we don't talk about how we do it. And the old way was learning on the job, but there is a discipline here that I think deserves to be researched and acknowledged.
Well, there's always a great opportunity when you can fill a gap, especially in a literature, and create that new body of literature that's needed, obviously, for an industry that has a bright future, right?
Well, we hope so. I think that the industry has really evolved post 9/11. I think pre 9/11 security was really considered, we joke, cards and guards, right? Access control, security cameras, mall cops. It was the mall cop methodology of things. And that is not to say that there aren't people that were doing amazing work pre 9/11. There absolutely were. But I think as the function has evolved, as our consciousness of organizations about duty of care and what our responsibilities are to our internal and external stakeholders, I think that the discipline has really evolved, and I think it's still evolving. I think the pandemic has shown new light on all sorts of things we hadn't considered before. So it's really in a space of growth, I think, for the last 20 years.
Oh, that is fantastic. And growth is very important as well. So you being one of 8 authors of the book, you wrote a chapter on risk and resilience. So tell us a little bit about your chapter and what it's all about.
Sure. Well, resilience of late, I think, is really become kind of one of those corporate buzzwords, and it is used and defined in a bunch of things. For the purpose of my chapter, I thought about resilience as the ability to constructively and effectively adapt to change. So what barriers exist for making you effectively adapt to change? And then I wanted to focus on organizational resilience, so within the corporate security function. And so how do those functions sustain adversity and recover from change? And then my chapter really advocates for creating a resilient security function. It's looking at corporate security and talking about that mindset that really kind of focuses on risk-related resilience.
So let me ask you this question. I like the fact that you focus on the organizational features of resilience, but how do you measure resilience? How does an organization, because I hear the word resilience a lot too, and it does sound like a buzzword, but when organizations say resilience, how do you actually measure? How do you know you're being resilient as an organization?
Well, you have to develop, and we talk about this in the chapter, you have to develop a risk profile, right? You have to know where your risks are. And that is really doing an honest internal and external assessment of your function and how it sits within an organization. And when you're doing that assessment, you have to understand that we have blind spots, right? We have organizational blind spots. We have ways that we work. We have leadership that we fall under, and all of those things contribute to potential risk issues. So it's really looking at yourselves honestly as an organization about what risk factors do you confront as an organization, and then you basically take it outside yourselves, right? You can't just do that internal assessment. You have to go to your stakeholders. You have to go to potentially your challengers within the organization and have those conversations to see what their input is, because it's a collaborative process, right? Because you yourself, if you're just doing this as a security function, you're not going to capture everything because of those potential blind spots.
Well, so how would you say organizations, especially those when it comes to the security piece, how do you think organizations fared, what grade would you give some of the organizations in general within your sector or within the security area in terms of being, being resilient during the pandemic?
Well, I think the biggest, takeaway that I try to convey in my chapter, and I really believe this, is that any function, this doesn't even mean security, but any function within an organization, is their resilience is only strong as their weakest link, right? And
Mhm.
that weakest link in your risk mitigation, chain is is what's going to take you down. So I think, with the pandemic, a lot of us acknowledge that we didn't have pandemic preparedness plans
Mhm.
going into this. I mean, it was one of those things like, oh yeah, we'll get to it. Or, oh no, I mean, COVID is by far not the first pandemic that any organization has had to face, but it might be the first pandemic that has really confronted a lot of US companies on US soil, right? Certainly Ebola is an ongoing crisis, and it is certainly a pandemic. Just because it hasn't hit New York City doesn't mean that organizations haven't had to adapt and prepared and plan for it. Um, but I think everyone always said, oh yeah, we have to do that. We have to come up with that plan. We have to have that playbook. And then nobody thought about it, or it sat in a drawer somewhere and was kind of a basic, and a playbook is really important. And I talk about that in the chapter as well. I think, you have to map out those risks and the steps you'll take, and really kind of throw things against the wall and see what's going to stick. And then again, you have to circulate that with collaborators and stakeholders, and really make sure that everybody's on the same page. And it takes some time. And if you have too many unknowns, like a COVID-19 pandemic,
Right.
a lot of times, at least in corporate America, it goes in the drawer because you don't know what you don't know. And it's too much brain power to kind of sit down and plan through it, because
You know,
everybody's got ongoing priorities, right?
yeah, well, yeah, ongoing priorities, but it's interesting that it's just not security, it's just not the resilience piece. It's also, even when I hear about supply chains, it's just, I'm starting to wonder, well, what were we focusing on? Doing our day-to-day practices. Now that we see where all the gaps are across the enterprise risk within an organization, and we really see how, the security role is really getting, center stage in a sense, in terms of seeing how important it is to focus on those enterprise security management areas within an organization.
Well, what I think makes security so interesting, and this really is dependent on an organization and also on whoever is running the security charge, but security touches so much, right, of an organization. It touches how people come into the organization and come to work every day. It touches how people feel about uh, feeling safe in work, right? Whether that is being free from, getting sick in the office, or a threat from a potential hostile intruder. It talks about cybersecurity and how we keep both our employees and our clients safe, right? I mean, it touches so many parts, but I think security gets siloed, either as its own measure. Sometimes we self silo, or it gets siloed within the organization because it's seen very narrowly. So if you have a really effective security organization that is really working with collaborators, with its stakeholders, having a seat at the table with senior leaders, and having those conversations, you're able to really influence a wide swath of the organization, and then better enhance how you do your own work in security, because you know what other people are thinking about.
Well, listen, you did an excellent job in your chapter. And the thing I like about the book is that you all really came together to give these short, snackable learning opportunities by reading each of the chapters. And on page 57, you actually highlight five key tips about how be successful with risk and resilience. So let's talk a little bit about the advice you would give someone who's thinking about signing up for this book writing program, but maybe on the fence about what would you say to them?
Well, I think it helps if you have something to say. Um, this particular topic is a deeper research topic for me, so I was able to kind of jump right in. Um, you know, I think again that the lack of literature in this particular field meant that we all had something to say. We all had something. Well, you want to talk about designing a good security operations center? I can tell you what I know about that, because I think all of us have come up through the ranks and learned on the job. But I think if you want to get involved in a writing project, it helps if you have something to say. And then it helps also if you trust what you have to say is worth hearing, which is, I think, hard. And I think that's hard for women. I think that you can come to the table and say, absolutely, I have something to say. And what I have to say is actually subject matter expertise. And it takes a little while being out there, at least it did for me, being out there in the workplace and realize that nobody has all the answers. So you actually might be a subject matter expert in something. But that one was, that was a personal challenge. And then you got to just sit down and write. When I was working at West Point, the guy I was working for was working on his dissertation, and he had me run a writing project. And I said, I don't want to do it. And he said, no. Just like my dissertation coach said to me, don't think, just write. And you gave us some pretty tight deadlines. And I was really nervous, but it all worked out that we were going to get this done. It seemed very daunting at first, but when you sit down, you just got to write.
Yeah, I knew that it was a bit daunting for everyone, but you guys stayed in there. And I think the difference is that, people talk about doing a lot of things. Some people wish, and then some people do. And you guys were a group of doers, because everyone that starts the program doesn't finish at all, because things happen. Life happens. You have competing priorities. It's really about mindset and making up your mind that this is what you're going to do, because once you get that approach down pat in terms of overcoming your limiting beliefs, then you can apply that behavior in other things. But you have to get over that first hurdle and actually over that cliff, and then see the light at the end of the tunnel, say, hey, I actually did this, and I do have something to say. My voice matters. And I'm glad that is being portrayed throughout this particular book. And I'm so happy that you're one of the authors.
Well, thank you. It was really, again, I did have something to say, so it was really rewarding to be able to put it on paper and know that people can see it. I think silos are really dangerous within the corporate security function, as we've seen with the pandemic. Conditions change, and you have to be able to evolve. I always use, when I'm training our leadership teams, I always use the term room for improvisation. And the more that you have down pat in what you do in your day-to-day, the more you know your own risks as an organization, the more you're kind of attuned to your own blind spots, the more you have room to improvise when the world turns upside down and there's a pandemic, and the last time you set foot in an office was March 4th, 2020. And you have to be able to flex. And if you don't know what you're bringing to the table in terms of your risk resilience, you can't flex appropriately and effectively.
Well, absolutely. I love that. And, that is great advice and insight for anyone listening to the podcast in terms of understanding risk and resilience in the security management area. Again, Daniella, I want to thank you for being a guest on our podcast today. And I want to thank all our listeners for checking in with me. I'm Dr. Karen Hardy, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Dr. Karen.
Helping you feel secure is our strategy, all the way from the boardroom to the barbershop down the street. Subscribe at flipthisriskpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.